Hello, and welcome to episode 22 of Trails in the Pod. I'm Colin. That's Kevin.
Colin, do bracers pay taxes?
We have no textual evidence that they pay taxes or not. We have no idea.
I bet they do. Because with how implicitly Agate implies, oh yeah, Misha, she's definitely not dead, buried in a graveyard. I'm gonna talk like she's not. That makes me wonder, Colin, does he claim her as a dependent for the income taxes to the Kingdom of Liberal? Is Agate committing tax fraud with a dead person?
Well, he does have that pretty nice house in Revenue Village, and it's right by the farm. It's a nice scenic location. Property tax has got to be pretty high. So even if the Bracer Guild itself doesn't pay taxes as a nonprofit, certainly their employees have to, right?
Something is very fishy about Agate's income situation.
Personally, I think we need an investigation, and it's problematic that we don't have his tax returns.
You know what we do have, Colin?
What do we have, Kevin?
Chapter 5.
Yes, we both played it. We are here to talk about the main story, some of the side quests. The game is leading us to a climactic point, I think, right? Now we've seen all of the regions, and I think from here on, we're past the halfway point. We know there's 8 chapters of the finale. This is the end of chapter 5. We start to see more of Ouroboros. We start to see more of some of the wilder experiments, and we see more of Luva in particular.
We saw him this chapter across a very good looking dragon.
Okay, Kevin, I'll bite. Why are you stressing the very good looking? Do you find him attractive?
No, it's more that it looks good graphics wise.
Yeah,
It's something we've not seen rendered in the game. And so when we see it fly and move and yell, it's like, wow.
No, I mean, sure. I mean, most of the people that we interact with, right? They're 2D sprites on a 3D plane. This is the first 3D object that is acting as a character. And I agree with you, especially I have to imagine on a PSP screen, if you're 11 years old playing this on the bus, it must have been like that scene when everybody's coming in and shooting at the dragon and bring him down into the lake. I think that must have blown kids' minds. It probably blew my mind the first time I played it.
Yeah. But before we get to blowing minds, there are other things that people, especially Olivier, want blown. So we go from
Well done. Well done. Best transition yet.
thank you. We go from Rolent to Bose via airship. And like usual, Estelle has to talk to all the party members on board, which I like
Well,
because it's
before we do this, shouldn't we be talking about the side quest in Rolent?
yes, we should. Colin, take it away.
Which is perfect for your transition with the blimp. It doesn't matter. Okay. So as the chapter opens, it's the normal, okay, we're going to move on. Oh, wait, I better go check the board for some side quests. And look, we record this a couple of days after beating it, which means that we don't always remember all of the side quests. And I think that is a good measure for how memorable some of them are, right? The ones that we remember are memorable. Those that we don't remember are not memorable. And the one that sticks out in Rolent is Anton and his quest to seduce Ina. See, I've been talking about Anton for a while now. I was mentioned that we met him in the last game. I've been mentioning him a couple of times as we see him throughout this game. And it's stuff like this that is why. Because he has an arc. He has a mission. He is looking for love. And he picked Ina, the guild receptionist, noted alcoholic, as his first target.
So the MacGuffin of the quest is a potion of eternal sobriety. You can drink like a fish, and you'll stay sober. Your liver won't go out and die on you.
You can definitely drink like a fish because the most annoying part of this quest is that you have to fish a very specific fish. Kevin, did you do this quest?
You know, Colin, I did not, because fishing, 2 steps below suicide on my to-do list.
I mean, no, I didn't do this quest the first time I played precisely because of that. The quest is fantastic, and I'll talk about what happens after. But you do have to go down to a river and fish out pearl glass. And pearl glass apparently is very difficult to capture. Normally, the way when you fish, you like wait for the explanation point to like begin to grow, and then you hit the A button and you get the fish. But the timing on this one is so finicky. Plus, mind you, we are playing on a PC, which is digital, which means that input lag is going to be impacted by your display and things of that nature. So it can be very tricky. And not every fish that you get is going to be a pro glass. So I had to go through 2 separate rounds of using all of my bait before I could finally get it. And the trick that I ended up having to do was closing my eyes and listening for the exclamation mark to hit it immediately rather than use my eyes, because by the time that I registered the visual information, it was too late.
That seems wildly too much time and effort for a side quest.
Normally, I would agree. It's why I did not do it. However, especially if you have alleviated the party, which I did, the stuff that happens after is amazing. Because Anton reveals that he needs all of these ingredients in order to get a potion of eternal sobriety that the bishop is going to make for him. And then Olivier hears what it's for and why, and his face lights up. Because if you remember from FC, there have been allusions to a night in which Shara, Olivier, and Ina went out drinking, and that man's liver was obliterated. And he has lived in fright since then. But now he sees that there is a way for him to get back at Ina. So he and Anton run off to go make this potion, and they split it amongst themselves. So then we go to the bar, and Shara manages to bring Ina out by the promise of, oh, you're going to be consulting with one of our clients. Anton is technically a client, so it's not a lie. And Anton asks Ina out. And it turns into, well, let's have a drinking contest. If Anton wins the drinking contest, then he can ask Ina out. And if Ina wins the drinking contest, she does not get asked out. She could have just said no, by the way, but that's how they decided to do things. And Olivier is all like, look, 1v1, we know you. We need to even the playing field. It's me and Anton against you. Now, both of them have taken this potion, so they think they are invincible. So they're going. They're 5 drinks in, 10 drinks in, 15 drinks in. From what I can tell, specifically, Ina says, bring in the strongest stuff possible. I don't want to waste too much time with this. So they're like multiple glasses in, like close to 20. Turns out, if 2 people take the potion instead of 1 person taking the whole dose, it doesn't work. So Anton and Olivier get obliterated. Ina's face doesn't even look red. She is the woman of my dreams. She can hold her liquor. And so she wins that fight, and Anton is granted his first defeat in the arena of love.
Poor Anton, poor Olivier. How can he get the respect and love of Ina and Shira now? He is doomed to unhappiness.
Everybody knows a woman does not like a man who can't hold her liquor. Everybody knows that. It's a fact.
And then, denied the prize that is Shira, Olivier turns his sights on the leader of the motley crew. Let's talk about
that is one way of reading the evidence. I'm not sure that is really the story that's being told here.
Let's turn to the airship conversations. And Colin, I like these a lot. They have character development, reacting to what's gone before, what's coming up, in such a way you can't skip it. So the game isn't like we have to prepare if the player talked to them or did not talk to them.
Yeah, it's a good way to create, I don't want to say exposition dumps, but they're like concrete moments in which the game can store concrete characterization. And some of them are better than others. I mean, so you wrote here, Tita wants to go shopping. And I wrote in parentheses, I actually think that Tita is optional here. I remember right now that no, I did talk to her. I did see that conversation. And yet I immediately forgot about it to the point that when I played it, I thought that Tita was optional because I forgot talking to her. To be honest, Tita is not my favorite character, but we will talk about this.
we got to talk about Olivier. He and Estelle bond. He says he admires her, that she's grown so much. What a fine leader she is. What a fine young woman she's becoming. And then he Olivier's all over it by all but saying, you know what? I'm willing to do you the favor of taking your virginity.
So I'm glad that you mentioned Olivier because I do want to point out. So I guess at this point it was 2 episodes ago. I said that Olivier was 18 or something like that, maybe 20. And you would have thought that this was the most heinous blasphemy you could make because every single person who has ever been active on our Twitter account all told us, no, he's 25, 26. And they're right. I was wrong. I could have looked it up on the wiki. I should have looked it up on the wiki. I just throw a guess out there. I want to acknowledge that I was wrong. But I do think it is funny that that mistake created the most engagement we have ever had on Twitter.
You should be more wrong, Colin, often.
But anyway, Olivier.
Olivier's age being 25, it's a lot, it recontextualizes as opposed to him being 18.
Yes, in this moment it is a bit different because Estelle is definitely 16, right? I mean, I haven't
Yes.
checked the wiki.
Yes.
Somebody can correct me if I am wrong, but I'm pretty sure she is 16. Now, granted, a lot of us grew up with classic rock. If you listen to classic rock, you will hear songs sung by 25-year-olds about wanting to have sex with 16-year-olds. At the time of development, maybe not the most unheard of thing, but definitely not something that we consider kosher by today's standards. That being said, Joshua did leave her, and she's got to become a woman at some point.
Okay. Don't know how to respond to that. Moving on. Shira gives us some closure, some more information about the chapter that we just had, chapter 4 in Rolent, talking about Luciola. She didn't have a family. She got taken in by the circus, and that was her family. She grew up there. The family dispersed after the circus leader died, and so she joined the Bracers. And so that was good to see, good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of links her former life with her present life, right? It gives us a bit of an explanation as to how she made the transition.
Yeah, and it's really great to see how, let's be honest, Colin, last chapter was Shira's chapter,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
But the game does not forget her after her chapter is done. She's talking about how she became the person that she is.
I think that they do a really good job, specifically with Shara doing that, because this isn't even the last time we're going to get some characterization. I do think that they're dropping the ball a little bit on, like, Chloe, for instance. I mean, Chloe had her chapter kinda when we went to Grand Cell, right? There was some good moments there. But have we seen anything related to that since?
No, like Chloe was not even a required party member.
Right. You could have seen not all of her scenes because there are some times in which she was required when you're talking to the Queen, for
Yeah.
instance. But when you run into Dunan, you did not bring her. You asked me to bring
No,
her so you could see what it was.
it was kind of odd
Yeah. Especially
because
they set up the pattern that in later chapters you are required to bring the core party member.
yeah, they set up earlier before you have to bring one or either of Shiva or Agate. So it's weird how this is the exception. This would have been her chapter if they just made it her chapter.
The Grand Cell chapter, not this one.
Yeah, exactly. Odd. And then Shiva says something I thought was really great for Estelle, talking how she's like her father, but different. She's her own person. That her strength, it's not like this implacable ocean that Cassius's is, but Estelle, it's the sun. It warms and shines on others because Estelle is with them. They take strength from her, and this sisterly relationship is always great to see, and how perceptive Shira is.
But I think it also goes a long way into even thinking about the party dynamic. So sometimes in life, right, there will be people in which an entire social group is basically centered on that one person, right? Who can just bring everybody together and you create this group of friends, everybody based off of their relationship with you. We've noted, or I've noted in the past 2 episodes, that these airship scenes, basically they create strong relationships between different characters and Estelle, but not
Yeah.
necessarily strong characters between characters outside of Estelle. And I called that a bit of a problem, and it still is. But by making a comment like this about how Estelle is bringing everybody together and is that unifying force, it kind of explains it. This
Yeah.
group would not exist if it were
No.
not for Estelle. And unlike the game pretending that it would, as some JRPGs do, in this scene, they are concretely saying, nah, without Estelle, there's not going to be a party here.
And that's fine. It's her mission.
Yeah, for sure.
So we get that. Then the rest of them are kind of meh, take it or leave it. Estelle complains to Chloe in pretty sharp detail how, like, well, she says stuff. The subtext is, I don't have a crush on this cool, good looking girl my age, bandit
Okay, I bet
Josette. Why would
I
I ever have that
I
crush?
have to say, man, I have played this twice. I have seen how Estelle reacts to Josette, interacts with Josette. I'm telling you, this is not describe Estelle. I don't see any reason for that to be the case.
Well, Estelle complains to Chloe about Josette. Subtext or no subtext. It's kind of forgettable, but also kind of like the subject of the conversation between Estelle and Chloe is a third party. It's not even the relationship with Chloe and Estelle. So it's like, oh, you don't even matter in your scene.
And this isn't even the first time that it's happened. In the last airship
No,
scene, it was the same thing. They talked about the same people.
it's like, sucks, Chloe.
Sucks to suck. I mean, Chloe's great. I do kind of wish they did more with her character, but maybe they will later on. We'll see.
She's kind of flat. I
Mm.
mean, she's like vaguely concerned in a puppyish kind of way, wants to do good, but I don't think she's as complex as Olivier, as Shira, as Agate,
No,
even.
maybe the same as Zin, although I think that Zin has more stuff introduced in this game that puts him above. You wrote here,
I think you're higher on Zin than I am.
I would agree. So, for instance, in our notes here for the airship stuff, you wrote, quote, Zin is mystic and shit. I don't remember what he says.
He talks about centering oneself, the energy, poised to let go, one's internal chi. Felt kind of like a stereotype. It's the mystic Easterner.
Yeah, sometimes they do kind of pigeonhole Zin into that. I think they do a good job at not completely making him a stereotype, but they do rely a little bit on this orientalizing old wise sage trope, which doesn't necessarily have to be bad. I don't think they do it, too badly here, but it is something to know.
And let's not forget the world weary experienced racer that is Zin is like 26.
No, no, he's older than that.
Oh wow, I'm surprised and vaguely impressed.
I think he's actually a reasonable age. I mean, I'm pretty sure he is almost like 40 in Kuro. Let's see. We're going to look it up because last time I guessed on somebody's age, I was wrong. So according to nihonfalcom.fandom.com, age 30 in FC and SC, 31 in Trails to Third, and 34 in Cold Steel 3. I don't remember him being in Cold Steel 3. I'm pretty sure he's not. He is in Kuro no Kiseki, which is like 2-3 years after that fact. So then he's like 37.
Okay, so Zin's about 37 then. Good to know. Or 30 in this game.
Yes. Which means that
So Zin's 30.
so Zen is the same age as you.
Yes, and we are as accomplished.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and then we have Agate talking around Misha as much as he talks about Misha.
Now, Misha's a name that we've seen pop up before. I don't know if you remember this, but when he
Yes.
was knocked out in FC, when he grows up, when he awakens up, his first word is Misha, right? He's calling out to somebody named Misha.
Yes, and I was texting you early on that I bet the way he keeps talking about her, I bet she's dead.
Yes. And I did not reply because I knew you were right. And I knew that you would find out that you were right, like pretty fucking soon. But I didn't want to tell you.
Yeah. So we'll talk more about that when we get to the main quest line. In the side quest, I thought there was a really fascinating side quest in Bose.
Okay, hold on. Before you do that, I just want to point out that much like I forgot that I talked to Tita, you forgot to talk about Tita. And,
Oh,
and that's because her conversation is, I want to see the market, and that's it.
yeah. Tina has some interesting stuff in this chapter with the main quest and how she relates to Agate. Some weird stuff, yeah, also, but here it's just like, okay,
Like,
cool.
I want to put it like this. In FC, I think they do a really interesting thing with Tita of having this really inexperienced girl then being shown the hardships of reality, and then she strengthens herself to go and really confront that. She seems to have digressed a little bit in terms of now overly relying on Agate for help for a while, and then yes, she steps up to like save him. Does it in a way that's going to get her killed if Luva wasn't Luva. And really, the development here is about their relationship, and it's about Agate's growth. It's not
Yes.
about Tita's growth. And we're more than halfway through the game. We haven't seen Tita really do much, which is why I'm saying that I don't think they're doing her very well as a character right now. And it could be that they do more. I honestly forget. I'm not trying to like spoil anything for you. I really don't remember, which could be a sign. But I think that they focus too much on her relationship with Agate and not enough on her.
Yeah, because, and I want to give a hypothesis here. Where Cheetah ends FC, it's like, oh, that's her arc. She has done her arc, so she's in SC. How can she grow? Instead of where does she go from here? They kind of punt her back to you've lost a couple steps. Go do the same growth, except not really. You're
Yeah,
like not as far as you were.
yeah, precisely. And this is something that, I mean, Falcom has mixed results on because, I mean, as you are aware, this is a long running series, so different arcs get completed at different times, and this doesn't always mean it's the last time we see that character. And sometimes I think it's handled very well, and other times it is, why are they here? Like, their arcs are done. The only reason why they're here is for fan service. That's like the whole of Hachimari. But
I know what you said.
I mean, hey, when it comes out, you might think completely different, but we're getting too far off topic. All I'm saying is that I wish that they would do Tita better, and I don't remember them doing so in this game. There is some stuff in Trails to Third, but we'll see how things develop.
I feel like every other character thing involves some variant of wait until Trails to Third.
So, like, okay, here's the thing: there's a number of people in the Falcom fan base, at least when I started playing, that were adamant that Trails the Third was skippable, was a side story, because it's kind of different in its gameplay. Its plot structure is a little bit different. It's not particularly clear sometimes at how much it impacts the main plot. They claim, which is wrong. The amount of times that I have said on this podcast, wait till you get to Trails the Third, should be tantamount proof that it is not a skippable game. Like, it is an essential part of the trilogy.
Yeah, there's something about Olivier, you said, something about Shira with like
Yep.
the Time Lords or something.
And more than that. And I wish I could tell you more, but there's some stuff in that game. People listening will know what I'm talking about, at least some of them. And I am not going to tell you what it is, but when you get there, my phone is going to be filled with messages.
If you know, you know what Colin's talking about.
Yes. All right. So we land in Bose, and you want to talk about this side quest, the missing lady.
With you
Well, yeah,
also.
no duh.
So I thought it was a fascinating side quest. Maybe intentional, maybe not. Give a brief rundown. We're hired to track down a classmate at the Royal Academy of Clothes, who we met briefly last game. Felicity. Who hires us? Her maid, Raina. Why? Felicity could be in an arranged marriage and she needs to meet a potential suitor. She gets wind. and is like, nope's the fuck out of here. She goes all the way to Crone Pass. And so her servant, Vayner, hires us to get her back. And Colin, the bracers are clearly in the wrong here. Like Estelle gets extra bracers points if she threatens Felicity, insults her, and demeans her into coming back.
You never
She's like,
threaten
I
her.
don't want,
You call her a coward.
and threaten to like bring her back by force.
Agate does say that, yeah. So I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here because I don't think it's quite clear cut to say the braces are clearly in the wrong. Number one, this is an unarmed woman that is going through incredibly dangerous terrain by herself. Now, granted, she did make it all the way through the Crone Trail
Yep.
to the checkpoint, and it's not like the area after that is less dangerous, is more dangerous. It's probably less dangerous. So that part doesn't quite work, but it's still a factor. Number two, this is imperial nobility. This isn't just random people. These are nobles in the empire. And as we know, as historians, nobles are kind of governing figures in a way. It depends on the roles that each noble has, but noble marriage rights, noble responsibilities, duties, all of this all make up a society's framework. And part of what the bracers are supposed to be, they don't interfere with the political goings ons of a target country, which includes Erebonia. So I could see how Estelle, like if Estelle and Agate were to say, okay, we don't agree with you being forced to marry. We're going to take you back to Genis Royal Academy, which is where she was going. That would be interference, right? That would be stopping an arranged marriage.
And Colin, let me counter with this. They heard the situation and decided to take the contract anyway. That is, they could have said, we're going to stay out of it.
That's true, but if you remember, they're not motivated by we're going to make sure this bitch gets married. They're motivated by she's unarmed and alone in the wilderness. We're scared for her, and a bracer's first duty is to protect civilians.
Is that their first duty?
Yes,
General Morgan says the bracers, their duty is to protect those who hire them.
General Morgan, I'm fairly sure, says protect the citizenry on multiple occasions. But that's not the only place that it's talked about. It's referenced a lot in FC. It's definitely referenced a lot in Kuro no Kiseki. The point of the Bracer Guild is to protect civilians.
Okay, but by acceding to the demands of Reina, they are involving themselves. They could interpret protect as we will get you to the closest safe space. And they could argue that is Yenne's Academy. Or they could take her back to Bose, but not to the suitor, not to Reina. By taking Felicity back to Reina, to the suitor, they involve themselves.
They do involve themselves. And I will say they also don't involve themselves on the side of the Erebonians because it is heavily, I don't even want to say implied, like part of the reason why Reyna is convinced, not Reyna, why Felicity is convinced to come back is because she's convinced by Estelle to woman up and say, no, I don't want to marry you, which would end the marriage. So it's not like the quest says at the end of it, Felicity is married. It's quite the opposite. So in that case, even from your perspective, they have to be doing the good thing.
It just feels something weird and kind of off-putting about the role of the bracers in having this happen. I could definitely see a situation where bracers didn't communicate with Felicity, took her back by force, and just like gave her to Reyna. Here, it's up to you now.
I mean, maybe you could see it, but it didn't happen.
I don't know. Like it just feels kind of slimy. The how the bracers were involved in something like to this extent, laying aside the fact it's nobility from Erebonia, foreign country from Liberal, that pose a hypothetical, Colin. Let you tell me if it's off base or not.
Okay.
What if the marriage had already occurred over Felicity's protests and she ran to Crone Pass to then go to the academy. Could the Bracers have been hired to bring back a wayward wife to her lawfully wedded husband?
I think that the answer would have to be yes, though I could see Estelle deciding to go rogue on that one.
Would the code of conduct, like how much leeway do Bracers have to refuse contracts made in good faith? I mean, we the player can if we don't want to do it,
Right.
but how much can they be like, I'm not going to help you?
I don't know if we know it in precisely that much detail. What I do know is that, so like if you play Kuro no Kiseki, Van is a Spriggan. And a Spriggan is somebody who takes on jobs that are not fitting for the police or the Bracer Guild to take, indicating that, these are maybe more morally gray options. These are more even underworld related options. And some people will deign to go to the Spriggan rather than the Bracers. Sometimes they will go to the Spriggan and the Spriggan will say, go to the Bracers. Sometimes somebody will go to the Bracers and be told, we're not going to take this job because it doesn't match with what we're doing. And then they end up going to a Bracer. So I do think that there are some like pro law enforcement, pro order constraints about what missions bracers take. I don't know how much agency individual bracers have for taking individual missions. That I just don't know.
Okay, so that's interesting. And also, Spriggan is the race that Kirito chooses in the Alfheim arc of Sword Art Online.
Thank you, Kevin.
Hey, we are coming up on November 6th, 2022, the in-universe start date of Sword Art Online.
I mean, by the time that this goes up, actually, it will be November 6th.
6th.
This is releasing on November 6th.
So this releases the day Sword Art Online began. Fun fact.
If you were to go into an MMO, like a virtual reality MMO, like Sword Art Online, what kind of character would you be?
I think I would be a character that wildly overestimates his skills and then dies in the first 5 minutes.
See, I remember that like it's announced pretty early on in that if you die in the game, you die in real life. So I would take the philosophy of why the fuck would I fight anybody? Let me just live my life in here until somebody better than me fixes it.
There's 10,000 people. 2,000 die in the first month. About 5,000 never leave the entry town. They do what you do.
Yeah, that would be me for sure. Maybe I'll go off to another place if like it's safe and there's more money to be made. But I would not be on the front lines.
I would for about 30 seconds.
Ladies and gentlemen, what we're telling you is that we're either cowards or stupid. So you should keep that in mind when evaluating our judgments. Let's talk main quest. What's going on in Bose?
I thought it was a really tight main quest, and this is not a criticism, it's a compliment.
Okay, expand on this.
Okay, so the first part, it's kind of whatever. We have to kill, it's three side quests of kill monsters that are acting weird, and it's okay, you do it. Then this great big dragon comes, and it looks great from a graphics perspective. Not Colin from a romantic perspective.
Hey, but I'm not kink shaming. I'm just checking.
It's big and it moves and it's so different from everything else we've seen up to this point, even the final boss at the end of FC.
I mean, yeah, the dragon is dope, no doubt. Something that I want to point out is that, like, yes, it's a bit rote that you just go to 3 locations and you fight some monsters. It seems mundane at first, but here I think that they're doing some pretty interesting atmospheric storytelling, because when we go to the dragon's lair, if you look at the enemies that are there, they're the same types of enemies that we fought here. And these are unique enemy types that we hadn't seen before.
Okay, so I would have skipped over that entirely.
I mean, I think that it's pointing out that like the monsters coming in, it's part of Ouroboros's activity with the dragon, and that's my theory, that the disturbance of Ragnar is striving them to go someplace else. They're scared, right? They're agitated.
I stand corrected.
But we need to talk about what the dragon did. Yes, the dragon came. Dragons can come and not cause any harm. This one landed right on top of the market, and who was rising it, but who Luve, who calls himself Lenhard, the Lionheart.
The market collapses at Bose. The Bracers, Estelle, and the Scoobies, they help
Still
organize.
the Scoobies.
They see, fucking Leela get brained, beamed by a huge chunk of concrete. And she's like alive somehow. I don't think anyone dies. It's kind of weird how that this scene and when the dragon fights the airships, no one dies. It's kind of weird. I don't want dark, gritty doom and gloom, but a reminder that these things at cost comes would have been good.
This is going to sound like a side tangent, but I think it offers a really interesting contrast. I've been struggling to figure out what I want to play next. And so last night, for about an hour, I tried to play the PS1 tactical RPG Vandal Hearts. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because I have never seen a bloodier 2D game in my life. Like when a human dies, blood splurts everywhere, like all over the fucking place. Same with monsters, same with everything. And people are dying in the main plot like all the time. One of the first things that happen is that an entire part of the city is just slaughtered by soldiers. And it offers a contrast to Falcom because, we have some of these same political themes of corruption, of evil, yada, yada. It's very rare to see people actually get hurt. And I think that this is one of the first places where it becomes really evident that Falcom wants to create this effect of being afraid for your characters, of morality, of showing the chaos of the world, but being a little bit too afraid to commit to it.
Yeah.
Leela did get brained by a piece of concrete. Yes, we managed to take her out, and last that we hear is that she's still breathing, but hasn't come to yet, and they're waiting to see if she recovers or not. But that is like the only injury that we see. A dragon landed on the fucking thing. Somebody died. There's no way that everybody gets out of this market alive. I'm sorry. A dragon landed on it. If a dragon landed on this house, I wouldn't be able to just collect my things and sell my wares outside. It would be gone.
The market is back up and running like the next day.
Yeah. And also, I want to point out something weird because the game keeps telling you got to prepare. Make sure to prepare for your healing stuff. Make sure you're prepared, player. And then you go and you do the airship stuff, which is awesome. We're going to talk about it. But you don't do anything.
No, I guess the saying, for the final boss fight, but
they're not because you're back in Bose. Then you have Agate and Tita, and you're still able to go shopping.
I wonder if something changed in development. Like there was supposed to be a first boss fight you lose against the dragon, maybe? I don't know.
I mean, it's either cut content, which could be a thing, or it could be they want to create the effect of you're going on this epic thing, things are going to happen, you better be prepared, and then not pull the trigger, which can be done well if done once or twice. But I do think that games should keep the promises they make to the player, and this is a point in which a promise was made and not kept.
Yeah, it's don't toy with the players, especially in games. They can always turn the game off and play something else. Is this up to that? No, it's
not at all.
Very minor, but just don't do it. Don't do it.
So before we do this whole dragon chase thing, we do have to go to Revenue Village because Agate has just taken off. Once that dragon comes, and he sees Luva's on there, he freaks because we have to remember that he and Luva had fought before in FC when he was part of Richard's coup, right? So there's like a personal grudge there. There's a bit of a vendetta. And then right in front of his eyes, he lands a dragon on the market and then heads up to where Revenue Village is, and as we find out, torches their fields. So Agate is livid. And we learn a little bit why he's so livid and a bit traumatized when we get to Revenue Village. Why don't you tell us about that?
So, like we talked about in the cold open to the episode, Misha has been someone who Agate has been very ambiguous when talking around, more like. Yeah, she's my sister. I go to visit her sometimes. He knowingly creates the impression she's alive.
Right. He even says, I'll introduce you to Misha. That's what he tells the party.
Yes. As we see, Misha's name is recorded on a community memorial for those who died when a battle took place at the end of the war with the Empire 10 years ago. A fire shell, an incendiary shell, hit her house, and the game kind of glosses over as she burned to death.
Yeah, and this is a case in which a character actually died. Died 10 years ago, but died. And Agate's been blaming himself for it ever since because he wasn't there to protect his sister. What's weird is that the mayor decided to rebuild Agate's house down to the same furniture inside.
How would he know?
Even though Agate moved, like, let's get this straight. Agate moved away. He went to Rouen to join the Ravens and then became a bracer. He's very rarely back in Revenue Village, and we know from what he says that he's never been inside this fucking house until he gets knocked out, which we haven't talked about yet. The amount of public wasted spending on this vanity project for one family. We know that other people died. There's other people on that memorial. What happened to their houses?
Not only that, Colin. One, how did they know what the interior looked like in enough detail? Two, they spent the money to build and maintain. Like, this house is in good condition on the inside.
Like, they maintain it. The kitchen is working. They have a picture of the brother and sister. How did they get the picture?
This is a surveillance state. Three, are we supposed to assume there is no one, no large family with a crowded house, no one that could better use an empty house in a prime location?
I'm pretty sure this is proof that there is not a homeless problem in Revenue Village. You know, that's something that kind of breaks the immersion. Where are the homeless in Samaria? They got to have poverty. Grand Cell has at least one homeless person, I'm sure.
Colin, pre-industrial, rural, subsistence villages were famous for not having any kind of poverty whatsoever.
I mean, I'm sure that some of our colleagues would argue that they handled homeless differently, so you can't really call them homeless, but we definitely know some people who think that homelessness is caused by capitalism, but this is not a academic grievance podcast. Okay,
so Agate goes to the mines to fight Luva, gets beat, his sword gets broken.
His ass is beat.
Before he goes to recuperate in the suspiciously creepy facsimile of his cabin that he grew up in, Tita steps in.
Yeah.
And is like, no, don't do that. I love him. And Colin, this is in a chapter when before and after it is made clear that Tita is a Misha stand-in. So Colin, my question for you, one, this is familial love, right? Please say yes.
So I'm not sure how specific you want me to get because this is a very long series where people do grow, they age. In this game, it is filial.
Okay, so the implication is still kind of weird. Remember, Tita pretended to be Misha and talked to Agate as if she was Misha.
I don't remember that. I remember him confusing her for Misha. Maybe she played along. I don't remember.
No, when he wakes up and is in the midst of self-pity, she says, I'm going to tell you what Misha will tell you.
I mean, come on. That's like, I'm going to stand in for her and tell you what. She's not pretending to be Misha.
But it goes on for like a minute, 90 seconds.
This is a 12-year-old girl who's now traveling with a muscular 23-year-old who she clearly feels strongly about. I don't think it is unreasonable for her to have a bit of a crush along with just the whole pure filial love that is present there. And then if it gets developed later on or not, I'm not going to comment on, but you can handle that decently well.
Where it started with the sister comparison explicitly made here and in FC. It's just if it becomes romantic, it would feel weird. But when they went on dates, would she pretend to be Misha also?
No, what the fuck?
It just feels weird. But let's just move on.
Yes, let's move on from our. We end up talking about incest like every episode.
We see the military in a really competent way. They are in their chosen element here.
Yeah, for sure. So essentially, we have tried to stop Luva, doesn't work. He flies off with the dragon, and we need to find the dragon. We take that dragon down, and the point is hopefully keep the dragon alive because the dragon is a creature of legend, more than 1,200 years old. Um, but also bring it down in a place that won't hurt more civilians by, like, I don't know, a dragon landing on your house. Turns out that kills people. So what they decide to do is to show off. They have the Arce, which is this brand new airship that Libero made, as like it's like the flagship for the operation. It's unveiling of the ship to the public, and then they're bringing in other airships to kind of surround and corral the dragon to the lake, to the big lake that's in the center of Libero, and then shoot it with tranquilizers until it falls down.
Yeah, except it doesn't work.
It works initially, but there's a complicating factor they didn't know about, which is that the way that the society has been able to control the dragon is by putting a gospel on its head. And so even though the dragon does get knocked out, then the gospel activates and it wakens the dragon up, and he goes running off to his hideout.
Yeah, and it's in this chapter they comment on the name gospel. It allows the society to spread word of who they are, what they do. And I just found that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So at this point, Agate and Tita come back to Bose. They're about to join the military operation, but they're a little bit too late. But Agate and Tita, they have to join you. I mean, literally, both of them are required party members for this next section of the game. And okay, Agate being a required party member, I don't have that much of a problem with. This is his chapter. I've used him before. He's relatively well leveled up. He was required earlier in the chapter when I was doing a bunch of side quests. No problem. Tita, I have not used. I don't think ever in this entire game. If I have, it was like once or twice, which means that she is very underleveled compared to everybody else. And there's not really enough experience gain to bring her all the way up. So she was a bit of a burden in the final boss fight, I have to say. It felt like I had to spend a lot more time healing her than I would everybody else because her HP pool and her defense were just so much lower than everybody else's.
And her HP in general is just so low.
Yeah, she's a low HP. She's supposed to be in the back, right? But this, so we end up and we fight Ragnar. The storyline with this is that Agate has a new device in his sword that will make it vibrate really, 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 really fast. And with that, then we can cut into the gospel. I'm not really sure how Tita's grandpa figured that out when he couldn't figure it out the first time, but fine, let's accept that. He gets in there. He does make a scratch, but he doesn't get in all the way. So Ragnar wakes up, but you got to fight the dragon. And this boss fight, it has. You say dragon boss good fight. I'm not sure if I would call it a good fight. I wouldn't call it a bad fight neither. So why don't you explain more about the mechanics of this fight and why you think they're good?
Well, I thought visually seeing the boss flap its wings and was good. The tactical moving across the map, you don't just surround it and just wait for the HP to go down. You have to position yourself, goes across the map. The one thing that kind of annoyed me was the unimpedable
Yeah,
all map AoE arch that it used.
that does a fuck ton of damage, and it is impossible to prevent. I mean, I guess you could cast Earth Shield on everybody, which would defend from the damage, but it's impossible to impede him, no matter what. He's going to cast it.
But I didn't die once. Didn't have to pull a Kevin.
No, I didn't pull a Kevin either. But I do think that I see what you mean by it's not just walk up to the boss and whack him until he's dead. That being said, the dragon moves across the screen and then you just walk to him. And then when he decides to, he moves somewhere else. And maybe you have to walk to him again. It feels more like it does give the dragon more free shots, so it's more difficult for sure. But it does make it feel like a lot of wasted time in some regards, and especially with Tita. I don't know how this happened, but her movement was awful with me. And she was always in a position in which she was like on the direct opposite corner of the map from the boss and everybody else. So she would get hit a lot, and then I'd have to heal her or have her heal herself, but she couldn't actually do anything useful, like heal anybody else or shoot anybody else. So that was a problem that I had.
So, what changes would you make to have the dragon boss fight be as you wanted?
So either do the moving around thing or do the wind thing. And then in order to make up for the lack of complexity, give it an additional attack or two that can be impeded and maybe give you different
Yeah.
effects. So for
Okay.
instance, in the place that we fight him, there's a lot of enemies that are that freeze you. So the game is kind of telling you to equip anti-freeze stuff. Giving the boss some freeze stuff would be like, okay, you've been paying attention. You were able to stop this status because you're well prepared. But they don't do that with the boss.
No, there's like no status effects, not really.
No, I don't think so. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of seal because there's sometimes when I couldn't attack, I think. Though that might be with the creatures beforehand. I honestly don't remember.
Okay, and it's tough doing a good boss fight because you want to be similar but not exact. You don't want it to be too different so it feels out of character.
No, for sure. And also, I mean, we talked about the boss fight from the last chapter, right? And that one was really difficult and so difficult to the point where we did not find it fun. And
No.
this boss is nowhere near that. I had some problems with it, but I still enjoyed the fight. I still enjoyed the combat. And I beat the boss, and I wasn't like cursing up a storm. Definitely a better fight than the last one.
Yeah. But also, this was a chapter where the boss fight was kind of the climax.
Yeah,
It's not like last chapter where the climax was not the boss fight.
that's true. That's true. Narrative wise, like it's a very important thing to fight this dragon. And then we get a really cool scene, I think, where after you beat the boss, Agate realizes that if the dragon is distracted, he can climb up some stairs, kind of, and then jump down and hit the gospel with his weapon. So long as he holds true, he's going to break the gospel. It's a really cool moment. It works, and then Ragnar comes alive and is able to talk to the party members a little bit. And we learn a
Yeah.
couple of things. I mean, he's been around since before the Great Awakening or whatever it's called, the Great Decline or the event that happened that killed everything. So he's been around before that. He seems to know Cassius. Cassius alludes to it,
Yeah.
and he does. And he feels really bad for what happened. He could see everything that was happening while he was doing it, but he couldn't control it. So he gave everybody a lot of money for repairs, which means that he can be a really, really powerful mover of inflation if he ever wanted to be.
I was gonna say 20 million Myra at the drop of a hat.
Just inject it into the supply. Come on, man. The prices of eggs in that town are going to go up.
Kind of makes me wonder though, darkly, what if Estelle died when fighting it? How would Cassius feel if he could have done it but just chose not to?
I feel like this is the scene for a really dark fanfic in which the entire Bright family commits suicide.
Okay, just gonna move on past that fucking weirdness.
Okay,
So
real quick, before we move on from like the price of eggs, I do actually have a point about a side quest I forgot. There's one side quest in which you have to provide all of the ingredients to the ant
no,
rose.
I saw that. I said no. I'm
I
not
did
gonna
it.
do that.
I did it. It was mostly not a big deal. However, there's one ingredient that I was stuck on for a while, and everybody gets stuck on the juicy bone thing. wasn't the juicy bones for me. It was the tender poultry. Because I'm pretty fucking sure that in every other marketplace, you can buy it and you can't buy it here. And I'm like, what kind of marketplace doesn't sell chicken? It's ridiculous. So then finally go to the Eyes of the Road and you kill some birds and you get the chicken. But that part seemed weird to me. It's an easily buyable commodity that the restaurant should have just been able to buy on its own, and instead decided to pay us to go get.
Colin saw that, and when he saw what the dragon was going to do to the local economy, he thought, you know what? They deserve it.
They deserve it. They deserve a good meal. I love cooking now. I sympathize. Also, you finish that quest, they never tell you what recipe it is. It would have been cool to learn the recipe, but we didn't.
No.
So let's move on to the final moments. We have a little bit of conversation between General Morgan and Agate, but really the most important thing pops up. We're back in Revenue Village. Tita and Agate want to come and pay their respects to Misha. Turns out Morgan is there, also paying his respects because he does feel guilty for letting all of that happen. I know that he didn't cause it, and I think you and I agree that he's not at fault, but it is a narrative fact that he feels guilty about it. And then while they're talking about it, Luva shows up to also pay respect for the dead.
I just want to say about General Morgan, like, it's weird how someone of his stature would feel guilty. And I just want to explain in brief. He did everything he could to help his country. He did not mean for the battle to be fought there. That was the invading Erebonian army's decision. It was an Erebonian attack that destroyed the village, not liberal, not even fighting from both. You know, kids died, Misha burned to death. It sucks, but it's war. Shit happens. I don't. He feels so strongly, the cynic in me says, because Agate is one of the major characters, and that's why.
It's possible. I mean, I can also see, like, I think that Morgan knows that he couldn't have actually prevented it. He knows that shit happens in war. He talks about that. That doesn't mean that you can't feel guilt too. Guilt is not a rational thing all the time. And especially, somebody with such sense of duty, such sense of patriotism, and such a sense of feeling like he must protect his whole country. I can easily see, while objectively speaking, it's not a failure, how he would approach it as a failure.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it.
I think what's far more interesting is that, kind of like with Morgan is a sensitive guy. He's a nice guy who kind of like hides behind a gruff exterior, right? And Luva's kind of the same way. Luva acts like he's this evil guy. But we learned from Ragnar that if it wasn't for Luva, Bose would be burned to the ground. The entirety of Revenue Village would be burned from the ground. Luva was playing a moderating influence on the dragon. He also shows up to pay respect to the dead, which is not something that he has to do. Here he does bring up Hamel again. That name keeps popping up, and we're going to learn what that is, I'm sure. But like, even though he presents himself as an agent of chaos, as an agent of evil, it's clear that he's a good guy. Let's not forget that, yes, he burnt down the orphanage. He also saved all the children in the orphanage.
I mean, he could have just not burnt down the orphanage in the first place.
But what I'm saying is that the games are going out of their way to show that while Luva is doing the bidding of this evil organization, he does what he can to stop the evil organization from being evil.
You know what? I don't give him any credit, Colin. All the evil that he could stop from others, that he turns a blind eye or doesn't bestir himself, or maybe facilitates through inaction, the people he could have warned, the steps he could have taken, because he's not a homicidal maniac 24/7. Like, okay, he has a code that doesn't extend to what if there was a group of children touring that got squished under the concrete when the market fell?
Okay, but I think that this is a point that goes against your overall point because if we remember in the scene that we didn't even talk about this scene, but at the opening of the chapter, there's a conversation between Luciola, Walter, and Campanella. And Luciola is like, huh, where's Luva? Wasn't he supposed to be here? And Campanella says, well, Luva decided to go with the professor for their last experiment, meaning that Luva was not expected to go to that experiment. He was not required to go to that experiment. He knew about the experiment and decided to go there. And we learned from Ragnar that the entire time he was there, he was preventing Ragnar from wreaking more destruction. So I mean, that's a moment in which he sees that terrible things are going to happen and does what he can to stop terrible things from happening.
Except he doesn't, he to lessen his own culpability. He does not want to feel guilty. If terrible things do not involve him, nothing we have seen leads me to think he would step in.
I mean, I think that we don't know enough about the character to make that kind of judgment, specifically about his emotions about it. What we do see are his actions, and every time that he acts, we see him lessening harm. Still sometimes causing harm, don't get me wrong. He is part of Ouroboros. It's clear that he is operating on their behalf. He's fulfilling their plans. Whatever plan that they have, he's a part of it. But what I'm saying is that every time we see him act for Ouroboros, he also acts for the good of everybody else.
But again, what about the just randomness that happened when you do these kind of activities that could, it didn't, but it could have led to mass or even moderate amounts of civilian death
But
that
okay,
he could
Ragnar,
not prevent or control.
man, Ragnar even straight up says if Luva wasn't there, that's what would have happened. That Bose would have burnt to the ground. It's because
But what
Luva
about
was there that it didn't happen.
but say the market. Let's just focus on the market. It's chance that people didn't die. I mean, it's narrative contrivance, but you could have just destroyed the market and killed lots of people.
For sure. But no matter what, you have to agree it's less people than killing the entire city.
I'd say it's less people, but I don't give him credit for that in the same way I don't give Superman credit for not killing everyone, or I don't give you credit for not killing people in Ithaca every day.
Dude, I've been driving on these streets. You should give me some credit because some of these drivers fucking suck.
Yeah, but he causes less harm. He's still fine with harm and with random chance that cannot be controlled emanating from the actions he takes. Even if it's less than it could be, like I said, what if there was a group of school kids in the market?
Look, I think at this point we're going to have to agree to disagree.
He is negligent, if not culpable.
I think he is an unsung hero that does what he can to lessen the harm of his colleagues. But with
Then,
that,
the fact, fight them. Don't do half hissy measures.
I'm just going to say we'll play the rest of the game. Do we have anything else that we want to talk about for this chapter?
I think we hit all the major points of plot, of characters, of side quest, of where they've been. And then now we're getting into the start of the end game.
We are. We are. I talked about this to you off camera. Chapter 6 and 7 are pretty. I don't think there's any side quests in them from what I remember and from what I saw in the guide. We might decide that it's worth doing both of them in one episode, depending on their length. But that's a decision that we'll make later. At the end of this episode, we are not making any decisions on that, just so that when a decision comes down, we're not being inconstant. I'm stating right now that we don't know what's going to happen, but you will know. You might even know before this episode comes up, but at the time of this recording, we don't know.
Yeah. So see you next time for sidebar episode.
Yes, which also we have not decided what it is, but we will decide what it is.
Yes.
Out.
I'm Kevin. That's Colin. See you next time.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye-bye.